Welcome to our series, Uncoupling the Myth, where we challenge the narrative that non-monogamy destroys relationships. After a recent podcast episode on this very topic, Natasha was flooded with messages, hundreds of people thanking her for validating their relationship choices and lived experiences. That response made it clear, these voices deserve more airtime. So in this series, we're amplifying real stories and offering a more hopeful, grounded, and nuanced view than what you typically hear about. To be clear, as both a relationship and sexuality expert, Natasha is not here to advocate for non-monogamy or monogamy. She's here to advocate for healthy, ethical relationships, no matter what form they take. Please enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can also find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The information shared on this program is informational and should not be considered therapy. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality and may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
And we are taking down shame anywhere we can get it on this podcast. So that's what we're about. And I'm super happy to have Andrea with us today. I want to just start off by saying this is a podcast in the series of what I'm calling Uncoupling the Myth. So even though I talk about a lot of different things, I have two series going on right now. One is Uncoupling the Myth, and one is Lucy in the Sky with Dinahs. So just to let you know, Lucy in the Sky with Dinahs has to do with psychedelics and the intersection between mental health and sexuality and mental health. Did I say that right? Psychedelics, mental health, sexuality. Anyway, religion. Can't even keep track of what I'm saying. And then the second series, which is Uncoupling the Myth, is where we challenge this narrative that non-monogamy destroys relationships. After a recent podcast I just did on this topic, I was flooded with messages, hundreds, literally hundreds of people thanking me for validating their relationship choices and lived experiences. And that response made it clear that these voices deserve more airtime. So in this series, I'm trying to amplify real stories and offering hopefully a more hopeful, grounded, and nuanced view than what you might typically hear about. And I want to be clear that as both a relationship and sexuality expert, I'm not here to advocate for non-monogamy or monogamy. I'm here to advocate for healthy, ethical relationships, no matter what form they take. So having said that, welcome to the show, Andrea.
Thank you.
Good to have you. I have a little bit of an intro for you. I know you're from the Seattle area of Washington. You were raised in a very devout Mormon family. You went to Seattle Pacific University for your master's degree in marriage and family therapy. So in that, we have a lot in common. And you've been working as a therapist since graduating in 2015. So you're about a decade into your journey. I'm 3 decades in, but don't tell anybody because that ages me.
Okay. I won't say a word.
And then you moved to Utah in 2021 and discovered ethical non-monogamy during your separation. So I don't know if that means that you were married or partnered. You can share that.
Yeah. So that is a really big part of my story. I was married for a long time, like 14 years or something like that. And it's a little bit like lots of intersecting pieces. At the time, like sex was a really big issue in my marriage. I was like a really low desire partner, and it was something that just always caused some conflict. And I think as I've learned more about it and studied and gone through that whole journey, I feel like I don't blame like myself or my ex-husband. I feel like both of us sort of came into it as I think a lot of Mormons do, without a whole lot of knowledge and experience, and not really a chance to test out that compatibility beforehand, if that makes sense. And so there's that piece, and then also we weren't able to get pregnant for a really long time. I have infertility stuff in my background, and so that was like an added layer of complication that I think was one of the things that led me toward wanting to be a therapist, was wanting to find a therapist who was at the time LDS, and then also had like a background with infertility and how that presents in the church. So it was kind of a catalyst for going back to grad school and wanting to sort of pursue this field, and noticing and like seeing firsthand the impact that fertility treatments and that can have on the sexual relationship of a couple, was another thing that kind of put that in the forefront of my mind. And then, so after my separation, well, let me back up a little bit. So towards the end of my marriage, I was sort of in the place where like I heard about the concept of asexuality, and I was like, oh, this might be me. Like this kind of resonates in a couple different places. But as you might know and be familiar with, there's not a whole lot of room for like exploration or experimentation within the LDS and being married and all of that kind of stuff. So I sort of tried to like figure it out the best I could in my mind, and sort of like imagine like, okay, if I were in this scenario, like would I feel desire then? Right. Like a lot of kind of mental work around it. Um,
But
and
trying
then when I got to,
specifically trying to figure out why you weren't experiencing a lot of desire in your marriage. Sexual
yeah, yeah,
desire. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And so trying to figure out like if the asexuality thing was a good fit, or if it like
Oh.
felt like, oh yeah, this is a thing. And so that was kind of what led toward the unraveling of the marriage, because at that point, like I think it was enough that my then husband was like, this is kind of a deal breaker, which I totally understand, especially now, like having a little bit more of a context and a perspective of what like the sexual relationship means in a marriage. And so again, I say like I don't really have a lot of like hard feelings or blame towards either one of us. I think that there are some areas where I saw in my own marriage, and then also in I used to work with a lot of LDS couples when I was still active in the church as a therapist, and seeing that a lot in some other LDS couples as well, where there's a lot of just conflict or issues or distress around like sex and the sexual relationship and desire discrepancies and all of that stuff, which you're very familiar with. So I don't have to go into all that. And so when we separated, I sort of was left in a place of like, okay, well, I mean, I guess I can kind of try to figure this stuff out in a little bit more of a practical way now. And so I started dating, and at that point, I was pretty much like out of the church, and so fortunately didn't have a whole lot of like shame hangups in that regard. And so I was able to do a little bit of exploration and kind of figure out like, oh, okay, so asexuality is maybe not as good of a fit as I thought it was, and maybe had more to do with a lot of other factors that were contributing to that in my relationship. So when I was initially dating, I wasn't really in any place to like start a exclusive monogamous relationship. And so that sort of led me into meeting and interacting with people who practiced non-monogamy. And then the more that I learned about it, there were things that I found really lovely and beautiful about it. And again, just kind of the stage of my life, it was a good fit. And so since then, I've learned a lot more about it and had a lot more experience with it. I also was somebody who was listening to the podcast that you were on, where they talked about non-monogamy, and I was like, oh, thank you, Natasha, for pushing back on some of that, because I do see that pretty frequently. And then also like being a therapist, you hear about like people are like, well, you're in an open relationship. Well, that's your problem. Right? Like, and it's like, okay, well, that's not necessarily the problem. So anyway, so that's kind of what led me to reach out and want to talk a little bit more about it.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to recap some of this because some of
Yeah.
them I want to go a little
That was a lot. Yeah.
So it sounds to me like you're saying, okay, yes, due to the fact that we grew up in high demand conservative religion, which most of those religions, including Mormonism, have quite a bit of prohibitions in regards to sexual exploration prior to marriage. Right. And not just even exploration, but just fairly I would say rigid identity work. Like all of us should consider ourselves heterosexual. All of us should consider ourselves interested in sex with the right person at the right time.
The right time, in the right circumstances,
in the right situation, right.
Very narrow parameters.
Yes, exactly. And I think we also come from this space where it's like, well, and even though sex is important, especially to have those babies we want you to have, and even, I mean, in Mormonism, we do get some sex positivity. Like it'd be nice if you could connect and join in this way and bond in this way. But if you happen to not, sex would never be a really good reason to separate or divorce because you know, sex is kind of a peripheral thing that would be nice if we enjoy, but not an eternal concept that you would base marital decisions on.
Right. Yes. Yeah, for sure.
So you're finding yourself in a marriage where one, it sounds like you didn't explore a lot of your sexual compatibility or chemistry as a couple, which I always like to caveat that a little bit. I mean, there are plenty of people who have hot sex prior to marriage and then still end up in a sex therapist's office later. So it's not like that guarantees that all sex would go well. But I do think it's problematic when it's the other way around, when we don't have that much sexual chemistry to begin with, but we're expecting that somehow it's going to develop through marriage or something like that. So it sounds like you didn't get a lot of chance to explore that. Then you were hit with infertility, which I think an infertility journey affects sexual desire.
It really does. Yeah.
I mean, that's just a really hardcore thing, I think, for both partners in different ways. And it's a whole other podcast. We could talk about that. And then you come to, you know, how long were you married for? How long?
I want to say like 15 years.
15 years. Okay. So this is not short. This is not like 2 years. So you're hanging in there. It sounds like you have a fairly okay relationship. You don't hate each other or anything, but you're coming to conclusions about whether or not this is a sustainable relationship. And one of the things you start wondering about as you notice not having drive for this particular person is, I must be asexual then, or gray sexual, which is something, nothing wrong with being asexual. Nothing wrong with asexual. And I think that is a legitimate space where people land. At the same time, I will say that the amount of people who identify as asexual in our country versus the percentage of post-Mormon women or even Mormon women or even religious women who wonder this because they're lower drive than their partner is exponentially higher percentage-wise than the asexual population at large. So it sounds like that was part of your journey, is exploring, could this be my orientation? Could this be my identity? And as you're discussing that with your husband, he's like, well, I could respect that. And yet that's not what I want for a long-term marriage relationship. Marriage is, you know, still, I mean, the whole monogamy script is that we would share our sexuality only with one person. So if I can't share it with you, which is what maybe makes a marital relationship different than other relationships, where am I supposed to share that? And I do want to express that in my life. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The two of you do a non-Mormon thing, which is like, this is a legitimate reason to not stay together.
Right. Or even, you know, sometimes I wonder about like, I mean, this wasn't a good fit for a number of reasons, but I wonder about like if the option of non-monogamy had been something that we could have considered right at that time, not necessarily because because I am asexual or anything. Like I don't feel like that is a good fit anymore. But because exactly what you're saying, right? Like there's this one area where we're sort of allowed to explore and express that relationship and that sexuality. And I think even particularly within, I don't know if this is, I don't think it's unique to Mormonism, but it's certainly front and center in a lot of ways. Like there's not a lot of exploration even with self, right? Like there's like masturbation isn't a thing that you're supposed to do, right? And so having your whole sexuality be carried by one person, like that's so much. It's so much to have on one person. And so yeah, like I do sometimes wonder if there had been a little bit more space for like exploring that and kind of figuring out some compatibility stuff, or even, you know, some of the, I think like separating some of the romantic or companionship love with sexuality, which is something that I've sort of explored a little bit more later on my own. But I've wondered about like how that might have potentially benefited our relationship at the time. But again, you know, like he is still very Mormon, and so that wasn't really like a viable option, and that's fine. But I do sometimes wonder about how that might have impacted the relationship.
Yeah, it is interesting when a couple has many good facets of their relationship going well for them,
Yeah. Hmm.
except for maybe the sexual component. And again,
Right.
I think a lot of times people, this is one of the misgivings of ENM, is like, well, you need to be good in all areas before you even try to open
Right.
marriage. Whereas
Right.
maybe this is exactly why we're opening up our marriage, is that we struggle in a particular area, or we don't want
Yeah.
to be necessarily quote unquote married in particular realms, but we would like to stay married in other,
Yeah.
ways. So, but there isn't a lot of allowance for that kind of thinking in the mainstream.
Right. Or even to like talk about it, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not even, you know, you can't even have a discussion and see if that might be a possibility.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me how we go in mainstream culture, we go straight to divorce as the
Yeah.
option, the healthiest option.
Hmm.
I'm like, wow, that's a high cost option too. And
Yeah,
why
it is.
can't we be a little bit more creative? Anyway, we digress. All right. So
Yeah.
your story then goes, you do get divorced, you start, going forward with this idea that, hey, maybe I might be asexual. What starts cluing
Hmm.
you in to, maybe that's not exactly what is happening for me? What starts making you question that original maybe?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think it really was a big part of it was just like the dating experience. And, you know, something else that I feel like is again not unique to Mormonism, but frequent and was part of my experience, and also I think like the conversations that I've had with clients throughout the years, is almost like you don't really go through what I would call like a normal or normative developmental stage as far as like figuring out your sexuality and the kind of exploration and experimentation that is like developmentally appropriate and typical for adolescence and young adulthood and all of that kind of thing. Um, and so one of the things um, that dating again sort of changed, I guess, or made me reconsider some of that was that it kind of put me back in touch with parts of myself that I hadn't really accessed in a really long time. Like
Mm.
I'm a really like flirtatious, playful, you know, like I like interacting with other people and kind of uh that context, I guess. And obviously that's not something that is like super appropriate to do with other people when you're married. And so reconnecting and getting back in touch with that side of myself was really fun for me. And then, you know, being able to connect with people and kind of like awaken some of that, like some of that desire or that drive was informative in letting me know like maybe there were some other factors that contributed to that, like wondering if asexuality was a good fit that maybe aren't there in some of these other contexts.
Yeah, okay. So as you start opening yourself up, you see it more through a developmental lens. And now I do have permission to explore. I do have permission
Yeah.
Had you already left the church as well, or were you still deconstructing
Yeah.
religion by the time you were divorcing?
Yeah, I think it all kind of happened at the same time. And so by that point I was fairly like out, as you would say. And so yeah, by that point, like I didn't like I was I felt more able to explore like sexual relationships in different contexts and outside of like the, very like narrowly prescribed way of
Yeah.
doing it that had been my framework before.
So at this point, if you don't mind me asking,
Yeah.
you're giving yourself permission to masturbate. You're giving yourself permission to date. You're giving yourself permission to sexually explore with people before entering into a commitment like marriage. And so you're starting
Right.
to find out more things about yourself, things that you
Yeah.
would have had permission to explore, like maybe between 17 and 24 instead of
Right.
whatever ages you
Yeah.
are now.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay. All
Mhm.
right. So you're going along and you're like, well, actually then I think maybe I am a sexual person. I'm
Yeah.
gonna shift my ways of thinking about that. And you come across non-monogamy maybe in some of the people that you're dating. So let's start
Yeah.
talking about what draws you into that. Because I think even in dating world, a lot of people see that and they're like, well, next, I'm not interested. I don't want to date someone.
Right.
So what kind of drew?
Yeah. Yeah, which I mean, I think that's totally valid and fine. I think sort of maybe just kind of everything converging at once to where I wasn't looking for like an exclusive monogamous relationship because I was very much in like this sort of like, I don't know, arrested development or like kind of like redoing late adolescence, young adulthood. And so I wasn't really looking for that kind of relationship. And so like, I mean, even though I think it's maybe a little bit more common in like mainstream culture to not really have the expectation of exclusivity early on in the dating process. That was something where I was like, okay, I kind of want to be upfront about this. Like, I'm not wanting to like to be exclusive or monogamous at this point. And and so then, meeting some other people who were like, oh yeah, I mean that's kind of my thing anyway. And I've had like longer term relationships that are non-monogamous. And so I think it just really matched with kind of the frame of mind that I was in of like exploration and experimentation was kind of the biggest thing. Like I was like, I've spent so much time like wondering about this and trying to figure it out and trying to like learn this about myself, but not really having the tools or the permission or the space to do so. And so I was like, well, like I'm gonna learn more. I'm gonna try this thing out or like find out more about it. And then it actually was kind of funny. I'd reconnected with some people from because I had gone back to Seattle and reconnected with some old friends and was like talking to them about, this person that I had started dating who was non-monogamous. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of really interesting. Like I like that there's all of this space to like explore different kinds of connections with people and sort of let things develop as they're going to organically without sort of putting on external prescriptive sorts of things onto the relationship. And then I had a couple of friends who were like, okay, well now I can tell you that me and my spouse are actually non-monogamous. I was like, yes, I had no idea. So that was kind of fun too, to be able to find that out about some people that I had known and then talk and obviously learn more about it through their stories and their experiences and then through, the things that I was exploring as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought because I do think people would be surprised to know how many people are playing around with some of these ideas that they would
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah.
But nobody's talking about it because it doesn't feel safe or
Right.
all these
Right.
misconceptions. But once there's like oh, you're interested too, now more people are going to come out of the woodworks in your own personal
Yes.
life for sure. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
definitely.
so there is a big difference between dating, like you're saying, dating and the maybe we'll call it the mainstream culture where people are like, well, I'm dating, I'm looking, I'm not going to commit
Hmm.
to any one person just yet versus, but with the intention that eventually I will, and that's
Yeah.
why I'm dating, is to find this particular, one and only that we're supposed to be
Right.
looking for,
Yes.
versus a non-monogamous approach to dating, which is I am non-monogamous. I'm not really looking
Hmm.
for a one person type of ongoing long relationship. I'm either looking for several of those types of relationships, or maybe I am looking for a primary relationship that would still be open to non-monogamy. So
Right.
can you start talking about what you're thinking about as you start entering this world, and have you figured out what you're looking for, and have you found what you're looking for, and all the
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good
styles of
question.
non-monogamy, right? So yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think pretty quickly I read Polysecure, which I think is a common book that people read. And I really liked seeing all of the different possibilities of relationships fall under non-monogamy, right? Like there's this huge spectrum. And I think like because I had spent so much time in a mindset of like, okay, there's one very specific and narrow way that is like the right way. And so I think the part of me that was like, I'm rejecting like this external sort of like being told how to do something. And so I think I sort of like was like, I'm going to reject all the things. Like I'm going to throw it all out and start over and see what makes the most sense for me. And I think that that's one of the things that continues to feel like a good fit with non-monogamy is like the opportunity for like kind of like customization, right? Like you throw out all of the like this is what relationships are supposed to look like, or this is what they need to look like, and you really get to decide with another person like what do we want this to look like, and what do we want as far as like relationship structure. And and some people are wanting more of like, yeah, I'm looking for a primary partner, or I'm looking for monogamy, or whatever it is. And so being able to like have those conversations early on and be able to say like, are we aligned in this way? And if things change over time, that's okay. Like we can adjust and we can adapt our relationship to the things that are different. I think one of the things that I firmly believe now, especially after having been married for a really long time, is that like people change over time. And the person that I am now compared to the person I was when I got married when I was 20, like I'm a completely different person. And so to expect, somebody to be like my one and only, or to fill like all of these needs and all of these expectations that we have on our partners within a monogamous relationship, right? Like they're supposed to be like your best friend and your confidant and your lover and a co-parent, like there's all of these roles that we sort of expect one person to fill. And so yeah, like the ways that people change over time and just how our life circumstances and different stages of lives, like the idea of being able to like customize and sort of create something that worked for both people in the relationship, and to have that be sometimes different with different people was something else that I really found like really intriguing and drawn to. Something that I encountered a lot, like when I was dating, is like people would talk about, well, I don't want to waste your time. Like, I don't want to waste time. Like, this is what I'm looking for. And so like, I'm going to be upfront about this. And there's this whole thing about like, okay, I'm looking for this one particular thing or this one particular person. And so like, anything that doesn't lead to this is like a waste of time. And if I'm continuing to put, effort into this connection that I'm enjoying rather than, getting rid of it so that I can find this thing that that is the thing that I'm looking for, is like, yeah, a waste of time and not, not a good use of your energy. And so that was another aspect that I really liked, was that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. I could explore like different connections with different people. And if it was like, yeah, maybe this doesn't check all of the boxes of something that I'm wanting, or, this is maybe a connection that I really enjoy, like have great conversation. And I love like, having these deep talks that go on for hours and, spending all this time with this person. but maybe, life circumstances like they're not a good fit for these other areas. And so rather than feeling like, well, because they're not everything, like I have to, get rid of them because they're not checking all the boxes of like this objective that I'm pursuing. I really liked being able to just say like, I'm going to enjoy this for what it is, and like participate and connect with this person in the ways that we both enjoy and are like positive and beneficial for both of us. And that doesn't mean that I can't continue to look for connections that meet some of those other needs or those other areas that I'm wanting. So that was another thing that I think has been something that I've really liked about non-monogamy as well, is there's not that same, at least for me, it doesn't feel like there's that same urgency of like, okay, I'm like, I've got a mission, like I'm on this mission of finding this person. I can sort of just allow things to develop naturally, and whatever the connection sort of forms into, it's okay. Like it's okay to have things be different with different people.
I so love that you're bringing this up because it is a lot of how monogamy is. It's like, oh, I really like you, but you don't want to have kids and I want to have kids. So I guess that's it,
Yeah.
to end it right now, even though we were
Right.
enjoying a connection or enjoying
Yeah.
sexuality or enjoying friendship or whatever those things are, or
Yeah.
or you want to get married and I don't, or you want to live in Florida and I want to live in California. So
Right. Yeah.
there's a lot of things that when you're dating monogamously, it's kind of like, well, yeah, if we are ultra different in some of these things that we're both looking for, it does kind of signal the end of that relationship.
Right.
As this relationship structure is like, well, I can continue to enjoy and be in the moment and have this particular relationship meet these particular boxes, maybe not all the boxes.
Yeah.
And in the
Hmm.
meantime, so yeah, I love how you described that. That was great. So far you're mentioning a lot of the positives, probably things that took you by surprise, um,
Hmm.
values that this kind of went forward for you on, like exploration and creativity. And also it sounds like there was a lot of things you were finding positive about the
Yeah.
experience. Let's talk a little bit about, did you find anything that was difficult to challenge your thinking on, or unexpected feelings or insecurities that came up for you as you started? It's no small thing, right, to start a whole new relational structure that most of us
Right.
have been role modeled one diddly squat about. So
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I've run into is like um entering this space as a single person is, I think, not the typical like pipeline to non-monogamy, I guess. And so sometimes feeling a little bit like it's like a couple's space, right? Like people open their marriage, or they go from monogamous to non-monogamous, or they have a partner or relationship. And so coming into it without a partner, or like without like a spouse, or a live-in partner or something like that, I think has been one of the things that I've that has been challenging for me.
mhm.
Another thing that has been hard is like coming up against not like hierarchical kinds of relationships, which aren't bad or like inherently wrong, but didn't really match with what I was wanting, and finding couples who were maybe more hierarchical without really knowing, or without really realizing that that was the relationship structure that they were wanting. That has been challenging, having relationships that end like really abruptly because, feelings develop, or whatever, right? Like that maybe haven't been talked about. That has been challenging. I think one of the other things that I really like about the non-monogamous space is that there is a lot more, at least in my experience, like there's a lot more communication about what it is that you're wanting, and like how do we want this relationship to look, because we're not sort of just accepting the supposed to. And I like, I'm, if anything, like I'm an over communicator. I really like to communicate about stuff. And so finding other people who hadn't really started to do that kind of communication, or like have those discussions, can, I think, at least for me personally, and then I think for other people as well, can kind of lead to some hurt feelings and, some, I think, being treated a little bit like disposable is something that that sometimes has come up for me, and feeling like, yeah, like we're the couple, and like you're sort of like this peripheral fun thing to explore, but like it's not like a real legitimate relationship. And that's not the case with everybody, but it is something that I have run into from time to time, that is hard.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that it's one thing when a couple can be very upfront about that and say we
Yeah.
prioritize our primary relationship and we do have agreements in place that if one of us is ever uncomfortable, we will have to end things. So that gives you
Hmm.
the option. Do I want to take that risk of potentially
Right.
having things overnight shift when
Yeah.
versus other relationships where there still may be a primary and yet they've done more of that work of making sure that secondary partners are included in conversations and
Hmm.
ideas about whether or not we're going to continue in this relationship or not. And
Right.
of course, there's non-hierarchical non-monogamy where it's kind of like
Hmm.
every relationship matters kind of fairly similarly, and we make decisions
Yeah.
based on all those relationships. So yeah, I can see how as a single, especially a woman in the
Hmm.
space, that can be potentially a little bit more challenging. Although I've heard some of this
Yeah.
from men too, single men that
Yeah.
can feel discarded as well. Like, okay, I
Yeah.
guess we came into something that made them feel uncomfortable, and then that was the end of that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I'm wondering, as you say, the E&M seems to be more of a coupled space. I'm wondering if that's there's so little statistics. I'm always looking for
Yeah.
statistics, and it's so hard to find like exactly what's going on because this is still not a very well researched space. But I wonder if that's more of a post-Mormon
Yeah. Maybe.
or maybe a Utah or even like, your age group, because I do think it's very common in post-religious spaces to have people who have been in monogamy now question
Right.
whole
Yeah.
structure, and not that everybody opens up their marriages, but I think a lot of people do from that deconstruction space. And I wonder if
For
that's
sure.
at a higher probability of being the case population wise in states like Utah where you currently
Yeah.
live,
Maybe.
or if that would be the case no matter where you lived, or even in younger like cohorts, like if
Hmm.
people are more in like their early 20s or mid 20s, if folks are just starting off non-monogamous from the get-go and saying,
Yeah.
I don't want a monogamous relationship at all to begin with. But that, I guess, remains to all be seen
Yeah.
as the research.
Hopefully more studies in the future.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, so would you say, if you're comfortable sharing, would you say that you have a person or several people in your life that you would feel are more of a commitment type of relationship where you see them more than just a casual encounter and that you have relationships with?
Yeah. And that's something that I think has really shifted for me over time. Like I've gone through periods where the people that I'm connecting with, particularly early on, where so much of my focus was like exploration and experimenting, where I was like, okay, I have lots of different connections and none of them are particularly like committed or devoted types of things. And then over time, as I've sort of felt my own desires and preferences shift into more of like a longer term, more like emotionally connected kind of relationship, then that's been reflected in some of my partners as well. And so yeah, I sometimes have like a mix of like shorter term and longer term connections. Right now, I have like a couple of more longer term connections that one I would say is like pretty committed and, very like emotionally connected and, yeah, like what you would say like more of like a typical like boyfriend kind of relationship. And then another one that is a little bit more of like casual and we kind of see each other whenever. And there's not that same sort of like we don't talk every day on the phone or that kind of thing. um and yeah, so it has sort of shifted as different like people kind of come and go. So I recently had a partner who I had been with for like a year and a half or so, and then they actually decided that they were going to be monogamous with somebody that they met, and so so that relationship ended, and so yeah, things just are kind of in flux, and I do sort of value, you know, as like I said, as things have shifted for me, I do value like the consistency and more of like the long-term kind of relationship. And so that at this point has been more of like what I have been wanting and pursuing. But again, one of the like things that I like about it is that doesn't mean that I can't also you know, enjoy and connect with people on more of a shorter term basis because I can do this.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take this example. Whoever it is that you're considering your boyfriend right now, is E&M destroying your relationship?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people, this is kind of what they don't see the sustainability in it, right? I think people can sometimes see the initial fun or the exploration piece, but when they start thinking about long-term relationships, this is where I think they get to this idea, this myth that it just destroys all relationships.
Yeah. So well, it's kind of funny because this person actually is married. So like
Okay.
it's more of like, is it destroying their relationship?
Yeah.
I don't think
Right.
so, but who knows? Um, but no, I would say it's not destroying ours. I think some of the like, yeah, I don't know. I kind of think of it a little bit like having kids. Like if you decide you want to have kids with somebody, like there's there's a chance that it's gonna make things a lot harder for you, right? Like, and in some ways, I would say like there are things that are going to be really different and really challenging. And you know, some I think I have seen people in the past where it's like they have kids in an effort to like fix issues that are going on in the marriage, and that often doesn't super well. And I think there's maybe a little bit of a similarity with E&M, where sometimes if it's like we're doing this as sort of like a band-aid or a way to like fix some of the issues that we're having, like that may not work out super well. And there's not, I think, similarly to having a baby, like there's not really a way to fully know what that's going to be like and how that's going to affect you as a couple and as a person and all of those different ways. But we sort of just like we do it because that's, you know, it's kind of like our culture is like that's what you're supposed to do. So we do it. And so I think again, another parallel is like people who go into it a little bit more like thoughtfully and more prepared of like, okay, you know, this is a potential thing that we could run into, or this is something that we're feeling, you know, aligns with our values and what we're wanting for our relationship versus kind of going into it sort of haphazardly. I think there's maybe some similarities there in like how it, you know, ruins or doesn't ruin a relationship. Like, I think you could make an argument similarly, like having kids ruined our relationship, right? But we don't really say that because, you know, that's not really what's going on. It's like the relationship changes and things happen, and like having kids is something that affects that. And I think like trying different relationship structures is something that's going to affect that too, and it could be something that brings you closer together and brings you a lot of joy and fulfillment, or it could be something that, you know, really tests the relationship and tries you and ultimately ends up being like, okay, maybe this, you know, this our relationship isn't one that we want to continue long term. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's sort of the way that I have thought about it as far as like, you know, is this something that like ruins relationships or not? I think it really depends on the relationship.
Yeah, I love that answer because you're right. There's no black and white. I think we can offer suggestions. We can say, you know, these are maybe wise principles to try to follow. And yet there's people who follow all the principles and have a horrible time. And there's people who maybe were a little bit more haphazard or not as careful, or they were reactive in how they entered non-monogamy, and they ended up having a beautiful time. That's why I try to be careful not to like, you know,
Yeah,
do wide sweeping generalizations.
yeah,
And you had mentioned that you had overheard this podcast where, you know, non-monogamy
yeah,
challenged in some ways. What would you have wished was said, or what did you agree with me on, or what else would you have wished could have been explored more deeply?
Yeah, I think just kind of what I was saying before, like that whether or not non-monogamy like improves or harms or ruins or, you know, strengthens relationships, I think we're sort of focusing on the wrong thing by saying like, okay, there's this thing that's gonna like make this happen. I think that a lot of the time it maybe like intensifies some of the things, you know, if there's a lot of conflict or issues or concerns in a relationship, then like sure that any sort of change or like introducing other people, whether it's through romantic or sexual relationships or even just like friendships, right? Like anytime you're involving more people, like things get more complex and more complicated. And so I think, yeah, like it's so every relationship is so unique. And so the things that, you know, work for some people are not going to work for others. And I think even at different times in our lives, like things that are a good fit and sort of align with the stage of life that we're in and the things that we're wanting and working toward, like that might be different later on down the road. And so to sort of say like there's this one thing that has that much like power over the relationship, I think there's so much variation in what it looks like for people that it doesn't really make a lot of sense to say, you know, this one thing is like a make or break for relationships. Because for one couple, you know, it might be that they are more on like the, you know, the swinging side where like there's not really a lot of emotional connection and is sort of something that's just done as like a, you know, a fun activity, and there's not a lot of like long-term or committed relationship structure in that. Like there's that high emotional exclusivity and low sexual exclusivity, or yeah, from the polysecure thing. Or there can be other couples where they have like really committed long-term, like polyamorous kinds of relationships. So like there's so much like there's such a big spectrum of what non-monogamy can look like for people. So it just doesn't really make sense to me to say like, yeah, this thing ruins relationships, because it can look so different for different couples, and again at different times in their lives. Like maybe they do like relationship anarchy for a little bit, and then at a different point in their life more of like a hierarchical polyamory or, you know, monogamish or whatever, right? Like there's so much space in there that it doesn't, at least to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense to say like, yeah, this thing is gonna have that much of a um like it's gonna ruin a relationship, because it's there's so much more than just like this one view of what it is.
Well, it's so interesting too, like as I'm hearing you talk, and I'm guessing as a fellow marriage and family therapist, you know, we can totally bond on this idea that it almost, as soon as you say that sentence, it almost feels like, well, then people just want stagnation. Like, because you could say so many things, like you said, you know, having kids can ruin a relationship. And quite frankly, there's quite a bit of research to support. I don't think we call it ruining it. I would
Right.
call it couples are deeply unhappy
Yes.
when they're having.
It can challenge your relationship in a lot of ways.
We've kind of softened the blow, but the research is not supportive of having children be like this really wonderful way that two
Right.
people are going to connect. We could say leaving your religion will ruin your
Yeah.
relationship. We could say
Hmm.
you know, changing
Well,
jobs,
even something like moving, yeah, like changing
moving,
jobs or
right?
moving
That's
away
going to
from
ruin
family,
your
or yeah,
relationship.
there's so many things.
Yeah, so
Hmm.
I think what why I smart at that kind of overall, oh, it ruins relationships. It's like, well, first and foremost, there's so many things are underneath whatever that thing is.
Yeah.
Even all these things we just talked about, parenting, church going,
Mm. Yeah.
career identity, what really, and a lot of people break up for those kinds of reasons. People break
Yeah.
up over money. People break up over whether or not they're having the type of monogamous sex they're wanting to have. You know, people,
Right.
but I think, and sometimes it is legitimately the thing. But what I have found is that usually it's the underneath of the thing.
Yeah.
Didn't communicate about it well. We didn't
Mhm.
emotionally regulate well. We didn't,
Right.
so then we couldn't figure out how to manage this thing, whatever the thing is, in ways that were relationally healthy. Now,
Yeah.
sometimes you've done all of that really well, and you just come to the point that you're like, we're really just incompatible with this
Yeah.
particular thing, and that's okay. But at least you've done all that other stuff well to come to that
Yeah.
conclusion. I think a lot of
Hmm.
times people are reacting in ways that their parents have taught them to react, that their culture has
Sure.
taught us is correct or not correct. So,
Yeah. Well, and I also think, there's like this desire or urge for like to figure out like the thing, right? Like if this is the thing that ruins relationships, then like okay, then I can avoid that and then my relationship will be okay, right? Like there's this desire to like have predictability, and like this is a human thing, right? Like we all do this. Like we like to be able to know what's coming and feel like we can sort of have control over the outcome, and so being able to say like, yeah, doing this one thing, or this sort of contained thing that we have control over, like that's what ruined or didn't ruin the relationship, right? Because I think the reality of it is much scarier, right? Like there's so many factors that go into whether a relationship is thriving or withering, right? That like a lot of it we don't have as much control over. And so that's like that kind of uncertainty feels very uncomfortable for me and everybody, I think. And so it is, I think, a little bit easier to say like, okay, well, there's this like this villain or this like bad guy, right? And as long as we can identify it, then we can avoid it. And then, we have like this nice kind of tidy explanation for why some relationships don't work out. And it's a little bit, I think, feels maybe a little bit safer than saying like it could happen to anyone, right? Like that's a little bit scarier.
oh, yeah, no, I can see that for sure. Well, I've loved hearing all about your journey. What is there anything I'm not asking you about that you were just dying to share with everybody, or anything that you'd like to just kind of celebrate yourself on? Because it sounds like you've been really in a very kind of, what I'm hearing is self-awareness and self-exploration and curiosity about yourself and what you want out of life. So either anything you want to say that I haven't asked you about, or how do we celebrate this journey that you've been on?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the things that I really value, and not just in like my E&M or like dating or romantic relationships, but like the whole, I guess, journey that I've been on is just being a lot more intentional about what it is that I'm wanting, whether it's in my relationships or in my life, or, all of these different aspects. I spent a really long time with sort of like these prescribed narratives, or like this specific certain way that things were supposed to be and were supposed to look. And so being able to like give myself autonomy and like independence, and be able to say like, what is it that I'm really wanting, and kind of question some of the supposed to's, or this is just the way that it's done, right, has been really liberating and like very freeing, in a way that has been really like really valuable to me just as a like as a person. I think so that's something that I would say has been like something to celebrate, I guess, is I do feel a lot more like a sort of an agent of my own life, and kind of creating the life that I want for myself, which is kind of, I don't know if ironic is the right word, but like for as much as we talk about like free agency and things like that within the church, I think um questioning and challenging some of that, both in religion or relationships or sexuality, like has been a way of really like getting to know myself and finding value in like the parts of me that are unique, or the parts of me that maybe don't align with some of the you know prescribed kind of supposed to do things a certain way. So that's been something that I've really valued, in like that change in myself that I've seen.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I encourage everyone. Everyone should be deconstruct. Well, I hate to say should, because then we're shitting on people. I'm inviting everyone to deconstruct monogamy, which does not mean we were all going to be non-monogamous. It's really what
Right.
you're talking about is we're going to question the automatic structures we've been given, and why do those structures exist, and why are we pressured into them as the one and only way to be human? And then from there, if you are able to challenge some of that, become more self-aware, then you're making choices towards monogamy or towards non-monogamy. I feel like that's where you get into that space of feeling more self-determined and more autonomous, more authentic.
Yeah, definitely.
Regardless of what your decisions are. So that's really big.
Right. Yeah.
Well, so you're a marriage and family therapist.
I am.
I'm assuming that you are now what I would call an affirming of E&M therapist.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people looking for folks like you. So do you want to share a little bit about where people can find you or work with you if they're interested?
Yeah. Well, so right now I'm actually I don't have my own practice at the moment. I'm working for an agency, so I'm not like taking on outside clients. But it is something that I am wanting to do more of in the future. So eventually, a little bit down the road, that might be something that I'm able to do and take on in a greater capacity than I can right now, because I do feel, yeah, like I feel really passionately about it. And similarly to when I, first thought like, hey, maybe I'll be a therapist, because I can't find a therapist that is like, experienced in infertility within the LDS church, right? Like, or there's a lot of things. That same kind of draw to like fill a space where I see like a need and something that has impacted me and had a big part of my journey and my development. I feel kind of that same draw toward working with couples who are E&M. I mean, my background, I was like a couples therapist for a really long time, and I really enjoyed that work. And then when I got divorced and I was like, okay, I need health insurance, and I like, started working for an agency, and so haven't been able to do the couples therapy, but it's definitely something that I feel like my heart is in kind of couples work. And so yeah, doing that kind of E&M or polyamory couples therapy is something that I am like, it's on my horizon a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that's lovely. Well, I wish you the best in your own kind of personal, professional, I guess, journey.
Yeah.
And we definitely need couples therapists out there that can work with all those issues, infertility, E&M, all religious trauma, all the things, faith transitions.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Be a good fit for that. But Andrea, thank you so much for your time and sharing your vulnerability with us. That's no easy thing. So
thank you.
I really appreciate that. So I wish you the best.
Thank you. And I appreciate you making the space for this. I think it's important, and I like like you were saying, just regardless of what path you choose, I think being intentional about it is something that we don't often give like enough value to. So I appreciate you making the space for that.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, thanks. You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Natasha Helfer podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can also find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The information shared on this program is informational and should not be considered therapy. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality and may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
There is a place where time slows to nature's pace, and there is space there yourself in her embrace. Some places should be left alone. Say the so we can always go to the homeland of the heart. 10,000 years of our human history etched on her canyon walls, alongside Earth's mysteries. Some places should be left alone. So we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart. Deep in our cities, we sleep without her stars, yet still her presence sustains us from afar. Some places should be left alone. So we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart.